patiently waited and have painstakingly planned your every move over the past few weeks. Started out with dreams of thunderous gobbles through the spring woods with visions of beautiful fans strutting out in the distance. You've done your part, your homework, you got out in the woods, walked around and listened, and then you walked some more. You know it's close now with the green popping up and fading away that dull brown. You've pinpointed your hot spots early, so roosting an old bird the night before the hunt is cake. You go home to chalk out that box call and clean off your mouth call that you've been practicing with for so long. The roof of your mouth has an exact depression where the call fits. You go to sleep early, only to toss and turn until that alarm goes off, seemingly an eternity later. Next thing you know, you're walking out, careful not to disturb anything, and being so quiet that God himself doesn't even know you're there. You reach your setup, wait for the fly down, hit a few call notes, and the next thing you know, you're carefully holding your front bead over that beautiful white and blue head. You carefully press the safety over to red, exhale, press the trigger, and bang! All of a sudden there's flapping, dirt, grass, commotion, initial excitement and adrenaline, but it quickly fades. A terrible feeling sets in and sinks to the bottom of your very being. You missed! All that planning, all that preparation, all the hours you put in, only to overlook something so simple as not patterning your gun. This is obviously my creative attempt at capturing the terrible feeling of whiffing on a bird, or any animal really, but I think it accurately puts into perspective how much time and effort we put forth for this particular hunting season. Just as a deer hunter would never shoot his rifle without zeroing the scope, thou shalt not hunt turkey without patterning thy shotgun. We owe it to ourselves and the game to make sure we know exactly how our gun is going to pattern when we finally press that trigger. Welcome back to my Spring Gobbler hunting series. In this video, as you probably guessed, we're going to discuss everything related to your turkey shotgun, including turkey loads, choke tubes, patterning, and more. Before we head to the range and actually pattern, let's cover a couple of things. If you've watched any of my other videos, you probably know by now I'm the type of guy that likes to be prepared. Mentally, tactically, spiritually, and of course, gear-wise. Unfortunately, the process of patterning your turkey gun can get rather expensive. Aftermarket choke tubes can easily run over 50 bucks, and some of the turkey loads cost more than a few dollars a pop. Fortunately for us, there are other hunters just as OCD as me that have done their homework with enough attention to detail that would make a scientist proud. So what I've done is I've used that information to make this process a little bit easier for us. With all the marketing hype today and the hundreds of product endorsements by pro hunters, I'm going to present some considerations you may want to make so that your turkey shotgun is the best turkey slayer it can be, while avoiding the bullshit. Keep in mind, what I'm discussing with you is just what I've decided to use based on my own preferences. What gauge shotgun should I use? Well, I'm using a Weatherby 12 gauge, but plenty of turkey have been harvested with smaller gauges. I went with 12 gauge because this gun serves multiple purposes for me, but like I said, there's other gauges that work, and 20 gauge has killed plenty of turkeys, and it's gained popularity in recent years, especially with women and children, or smaller statured hunters. I guess I should put that out there as well. But there are plenty of pro hunters who swear by 20 gauge. As new and creative shot shell metals are developed, wads and things like that, I believe this is going to expand even further, and you're going to see a lot more 20 gauge loads and 20 gauge shotguns specifically designed for turkey hunting. How long should the barrel length be on my turkey gun? Again, this shotgun serves multiple purposes for me, so maybe a bit longer than what you may use. There are probably hundreds of thousands of threads discussing how much effect barrel length has on pattern on the internet, but we aren't going to waste time discussing it because I could probably give you a dissertation on it at this point. The bottom line is the choke tube is what you should rely on for tightening a pattern, and then figure out which load works best with that particular choke. The more meaningful difference, or I guess the more applicable difference between barrel length is pretty simple as it's going to apply to turkey hunting. Shorter barrels will make it a little bit easier to go through the woods. Longer barrels give you a little bit longer of a sight radius if you're not using an adjustable sight. That's really as deep as you need to think about it. What sight should I use on my turkey gun? There's a huge aftermarket selection for shotgun sights, but I kept it relatively simple. I'm using this True Glow Universal Ghost Ring sight. Initially tried using just a fiber optic style sight on the end of the barrel, but I wasn't really happy with my aiming consistency at the further distances. And my other potential concern was not being able to get a good sight alignment if I had to take a shot from a shooting position that I wasn't prepared for. Turkeys have a habit of kind of approaching from someplace you didn't maybe expect them to come from. But this sight solves both of those concerns for me. Mainly though, it helps just make me more confident in the farther distance shots. What choke tube should I get? Well, depending on the gun you bought, you may have received a few manufacturer brand choke tubes. And if you're unfamiliar, a choke tube is screwed into the end of the barrel, which modifies how tight the pattern is by using constriction. So you can tailor the gun to your specific needs. Depending on what you're hunting, you can change the choke tube out. Most likely, the tightest choke tube that your gun came with was probably something like a full tube. Well, I'm sure you can kill a turkey with that constriction at the closer ranges. When you're aiming for a target the size of a pencil with a quarter balanced on top of it, you better be pretty damn accurate at those further distances. So your best bet, my recommendation anyway, is going to be to buy an aftermarket choke tube, and this will get you a tighter pattern at a further distance. And the choke tube that I'm going to end up using is the Carlson's choke tube. This was $30. I think I got it from Cabela's. Like I said, there are plenty of choke tubes, aftermarket parts. They can get a little pricey if you start going for some of the specific name brands, but Carlson's is definitely well known and it's a quality piece of gear. What turkey load should I use? Well, whether you choose to use a 20 gauge with a 2 3/4 inch shell or a 12 gauge with a 3.5 inch shell, it's entirely up to you. You need to experiment with the different shell sizes as well as shot size and brand to find the best pattern that you can. If you find one that works, stick with it. There's no need to shoot every ammo brand at your local gun store. Shot size 4, 5, and 6 are the most popular for turkey. Now I wanted to discuss shot lethality. It's generally accepted that at least 2.5 foot-pounds of energy is required to penetrate the flesh and bone of a mature tom. The smaller the shot size, the faster it's going to lose this energy. Lead number 6 shot fired at about 1,300 feet per second will cross this threshold somewhere between 35 and 40 yards. Number 5 shot retains about 3.5 foot-pounds of energy at 40 yards, while number 4 retains about 4.4 foot-pounds at 40 yards, all things being equal. If you're using any of the heavier shot types, such as the tungsten alloys, the heavy shot, that kind of thing, you're going to extend this lethality range even further than those general figures I just mentioned. This will come into play later though when we analyze our patterns at our maximum ethical shooting distance. Which brings me to my next point, maximum ethical shooting distance. What's that? This is something every hunter should determine for themselves before they actually go out to hunt. Now, the NWTF recommends 40 yards as the furthest ethical distance. There are many people who have their guns dialed in at distances well beyond this. After you go through the process of patterning, you can determine what your distance is based on the results you get, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Alright, now we're actually going to test the different loads that I've purchased. I'll be honest, I already went through more testing than my bank account would like to admit, but I simply wasn't happy with the results I got the first time I went to the range. So I decided to do it over again, changing up a couple things and using what I learned from my first trip. Here's what I learned from the first trip to when I went to pattern. Some of the different brands will consistently pattern off-center in favor of one direction or another. Having an adjustable sight will eliminate this from being an issue and causing you to have to adjust the point of impact with Kentucky windage after we choose our best load, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Another thing I learned after my first trip, I think there is such a thing as over-constriction. When using some of the different shell varieties, over-constricting the shells with higher shot count like some of these 2-ounce number 6s, or larger shot size like the number 4 compared to a 5 or 6, seem to cause the patterns to be much less dense than they should ultimately be at the distance that I test them at. This makes sense if you think about it. Imagine a bar on a Wednesday night, not too crowded, somebody pulls the fire alarm. Everyone gets out in a pretty orderly fashion because there's not that many people trying to go out of the same door. Now, consider the same scenario on a Saturday night. It's going to result in a lot more chaos. Take it a step even further, imagine the same scenario on a Saturday, but everybody weighs 250 pounds. Must be a fat person club. No offense. Definitely going to be some chaos. The more shot, or the larger the shot size you have coming out of the smaller space at the same time, the more this is going to cause the pattern to fall apart some. Pellets may smash into each other, and they may become deformed, or both, resulting in opening up of the pattern. Moral of the story is, try a looser constriction on both the heavier and larger shot sizes. If the pattern looks more chaotic with a tighter choke, you want to try the less tight choke. That still doesn't improve the pattern. It could just be that the gun doesn't like that particular load, but at least you've eliminated that from your list of possible loads to use. Another recommendation, if you plan on shooting more than just a couple loads, you should strongly consider using a lead sled. I'm no pussy, but after about 35 Magnum turkey loads over a period of an hour, my shoulder had seen better days the first time I went. So use a lead sled. It's going to take out as much human error as possible. You're not going to recoil flinch before the shot, because that's going to waste time, money, and it may cause you to pass on an otherwise effective load if you make a mistake, add human error into the pattern. So take your time and get it right. Now, with all that in mind, here's how I decided to work through the patterning process. First thing I did was I set up a target at 30 yards. And again, I'm using a larger size of paper when I'm starting out with the patterning process. A lot of guys just buy one of these type of anatomical turkey targets, but they don't really show you the whole picture. I won't be using these until I identify which load or loads are my best. So what I'm going to do on these larger shots, or what I did I should say, is I drew a 2-inch circle, about 2 inches, so red, so it's easy to see, and that's going to be my point of aim. Now, depending on your gun setup, the next part may be a little bit different for you than it was for me. At some point, we want to draw a 10-inch circle to measure the pattern density. If you're using a gun without any form of adjustable sights, you want to draw this 10-inch circle beforehand around the 2-inch target that you drew. If you have an adjustable sight like I do though, we can draw this circle afterwards based on where the highest density of shot is, and then adjust our sight to the actual point of impact. I'll show you this a little bit later. Doesn't make sense to adjust your sight until after you choose a load, because each load may have its own different approximate point of impact. Some may shoot low and to the left, some may shoot high and to the right. So if you're adjusting before you actually know which load you're going to use, one, you're going to waste time, two, you're going to waste shells because you may not even end up using it. And it's just a lot more efficient of a process. We can adjust the point of impact after we determine which load we're going to use. So now I'm going to fire one shot of each of the different loads at the target 30 yards. Now 30 is not just a number I picked out of the sky. I'm using 30 because it's still close enough to aim pretty easily without sights compared to 40 yards or further. And the pattern won't open up as much yet. But it's also far enough away compared to maybe say 20 yards for the pattern to open up a little bit to show any issues that we may have at further distances. So what you want to do before you shoot, you're going to want to mark all the pertinent info down onto each target, such as shot size, brand, distance, etc. From these targets, we will analyze the pattern density. Again, if you're using a gun without sights, you want to choose the load or loads that pattern the most shot within that pre-drawn 10-inch circle. If you're using adjustable sights like I am, you can use the 10-inch circle cutout and place it over the most dense part of the pattern afterwards. And what you want to do then is count the number of shots within that 10-inch circle. We're going to choose the best patterns, and then we'll advance the distance of these better performing loads out to 35 yards and then repeat the process. What are you doing? What are you doing? Go lay down. Down. Go lay down. What are you doing? What are you doing? Can you lay down, please? Can you lay down? I'm trying to do this video. Okay. When you're sorting through your patterns or just trying to determine which is best, especially when you're using these larger pieces of paper, it is easier to look at them from a distance than it is to flip through them and try to remember as you go through 20 different targets which one was best. As I said before, this was the second time that I went to the range to pattern, so I already had an idea which loads shot best, but I needed to reaffirm some of my findings based on the inconsistencies that I had last week, partly because I wasn't using a proper sled and also because I didn't have my sight dialed in yet. What I'm doing is I'm setting this white target against a white backdrop, and then I've got this cardboard cutout that represents my 10-inch circle. This is what I want the majority of my pattern to be in. I'm going to slide this underneath the target to kind of try to get the best idea of where the pattern is. And then once I kind of figure it out, I mean, you can see from just looking at it, then I'll just place it over top, draw the circle, and I can count my hits. If you want to get a little bit more creative, you can skip a step, just cut out a piece of plexiglass in the circle, and you can use that instead. The process of going through and counting the hits on each of the targets can be a little bit mundane, and it takes a little bit of time. It's kind of monotonous. If you're looking at a target like this and you can compare it based onto a similar load, this was a Hornady number 4. You can see the pattern was pretty terrible. It was dispersed low, but even still was not very uniform. If you've already patterned a similar shot size, like this Winchester XX94, you can see the pattern is much better. Because of that, I'm not even going to waste my time to count the hits on this, because I can see already if I was going to choose between the two of these, obviously this would be my pick. So what I'm doing from this point, again, I'm identifying the shot center of my pattern, and I'm counting the number of hits inside, that's marked in red, counting the number of hits outside the circle, that's blue, totaling that up, dividing the hits inside by the total number of hits, and I get a percentage of my shot within that 10-inch circle. Now this 285 number is not the number of total hits, because there's going to be a little variance here. Some of the shot may have hit outside of the target. Some of these hits might have had 2 BBs go through, but I can only see that it's 1 hit. Really the only way to know that for sure is to cut a couple of the shells open and count, and then do an average of how many are in each. But there is a lot of information online, as well as on some of the targets that you will shoot, that give you an idea of an approximate shot count in each load. But this is good enough math for me. What you have to pay attention to and be careful with when you're looking at these as percentages, well, there's a couple things. One, a high percentage doesn't always indicate that you have a good pattern. You may have a lot of shot within that 10-inch circle, but it may be distributed unevenly. In this case, it wasn't. This is a good pattern. The other thing to consider is, what's the total number of shots that you have? So I've got this number 5 pattern here. Right next to it, I've got this number 4 pattern, 54.54% compared to 53.33%. So obviously, this one is higher, but if you look at the pattern, it's a lot more open. These numbers are smaller. There's actually exactly 20 more shot that hit in this pattern, in this 10-inch circle, than hit on this one. Now there's also 20 more hits altogether on this pattern than there is on this. Again, this is number 4 shot. The shot is larger, so there's less shot in each load. So when you've got numbers like this and you're comparing them, because I'm using number 5, there's more shot in number 5 than there is in number 4. Obviously I want to go with this pattern because I've got a higher likelihood of hitting the turkey with the shot because there's more of the shot. So you just want to keep that in mind. Higher numbers don't always indicate good patterns. Higher percentages don't always indicate good patterns. You've got to consider all of the information when you're making your decision on which load to go with. After you shoot out to 35, you will probably eliminate another few loads. If you want to continue to test further, you can take it out to 40 yards, continue the process out further and further until you discover that you can't really hit what you're aiming at, or the patterns open up too much for you to consider it a viable load to use and hunt with. So it became pretty apparent really early on that the Winchester XX number 5 was the best patterning load for me, and this is what I pretty much identified the week prior. I just wanted to reconfirm it today once I had adjusted my sight and had the proper lead sled with me. So what I wanted to do was, from that point, adjust my point of impact. It doesn't make sense to adjust the point of impact before you choose a load, because one target may hit low and to the left, or I'm sorry, one type of load may hit low and to the left, while another type of load may hit in a different direction. So it doesn't make sense to change your sight until after you choose the load, but chose the XX. So what I did was I drew a pretty big circle around the concentration of the shot pattern, and then I drew a circle in the middle of that. And then I went back to my rest, the bench rest, and I slightly adjusted the scope. First took this shot, got a little bit better, then this one, a little bit better, then that one, and then finally to this one over here. This was my best pattern, 30 yards again, same ammo, and it was the Winchester XX number 5s. And I marked that this was my final adjustment here because I got the best pattern after making all the adjustments to my sight. So the next thing I did was increase the distance out to 35 yards with my selected load, again, the Winchester XX number 5. And you can see here, compared to the 30-yard target, the pattern opened up significantly, and that's going to happen the farther you go out. I shouldn't say significantly. I lost about, 255 compared to 285. I only lost about 30 shot altogether, but within the circle, I lost 50, a little under 50, 48 to be exact. The other thing that you can see between the two is that this 10-inch circle has got a bit of a gap in here. Now this is still going to kill a turkey if you hit it right. And I'm going to show you some actual examples of the turkey anatomy target in a second. But this just kind of shows you that the further you go out, the more the pattern is going to open. At 40 yards, I would definitely be under the recommendation by the NWTF, which is 100 pellets in the 10-inch circle. But based on this distribution, being that it's still pretty close to the 10-inch circle, I think, pretty confident, I should say, that I would still be able to put a turkey down. But I know that within 35 yards, I am going to put the turkey on the ground if I aim right. At least it's in my hands. I know the gun's capable of doing it. Again, as I've said before, it's just, am I capable of doing it? So, good information here. I'm glad I was able to get to the range a second time and do this. Now let's take a look at some of those anatomy targets. It's about 35 yards. Winchester XX number 5 shot. And that's a dead turkey. Now I only have 35 yards because that's as far as this berm allows me to shoot from.
This pattern and another 5 more yards will open up a little bit, but based on the number of hits that are on this this pattern here, I'm pretty confident that 40 is not going to be an issue for me. But the closer the better to a certain extent, because once it gets too close, the pattern's going to be so tight, it's not going to be a big margin for error.
So after I decided on the load I was going to use and I got the scope adjusted to where I wanted it to be, I used the anatomy targets. It shows the brain and the spine, the esophagus, all that good stuff, so you can see what your hits are actually doing to the turkey. These targets are great, but you shouldn't really use these until you know which load you're using, because it doesn't really give you the whole picture. It doesn't tell you where the rest of the pattern is. You know, when you compare it to a target like this, you know the big picture. When you use just one of these targets to pattern, you only know a small portion of the picture. So that's why I go with the big shot, the big picture first on those larger pieces of paper. Then I use the anatomy targets. You can see here at 30 yards, I had 52 hits, and I only counted down to here. There were 7 more hits farther in, and then who knows what might have been down in here that could have done some additional damage, but obviously 52 hits. You can see 3 shots to the brain, multiple spine and esophagus hits. So this turkey at 30 yards definitely would have gobbled his last time. So that's good. We know 30 is not a problem. Then looking at 35 yards, I shot this target twice just because I wanted to make sure that this was a consistent pattern. And you can see here that this is going to be a dead bird again. We've got a lot of esophagus and spine hits. We've got a brain hit, another one else up there in the head, a couple more over here. So that's going to be a good target. And we've got the same thing here. A lot of spine, a lot of esophagus, a couple in the brain area. So I know 35, without a question, this turkey is going to go down. Now on the opposite end of the spectrum, I did want to take it in a little bit to get an idea what the pattern would look like at 25. And you can see here, things are starting to get a lot more dense. This turkey, I probably would have shot its head off with as much shot as is right here. And it started to loosen up at the top and the bottom, whereas it's a little bit more evenly distributed on the 30 and 35 yard targets. So moral of the story is, you know, as the turkey gets closer, your pattern is going to tighten up significantly, so your aiming is going to have to be spot on. A lot of people say it's harder to kill a turkey close up than it is farther away. That's just the name of the game. So, but you can see here, 58 hits, all good, and then there were some additional ones. I had 12 there. So there's going to be a little bit more patience whenever you're getting that target, getting that sight alignment once they get closer in, but just take your time. And what I've done essentially with this is I've proven to myself that my gun is definitely lethal out to 35. I would not hesitate to take a shot at 40. Much further beyond that, without testing it, I probably would hesitate. Now, being that I'm using a number 5, I definitely have the retained energy to be lethal past 40, but I'm not going to press that threshold. From what I see here, 35, 40 yards, definitely doable. Now, the NWTF recommends that at 40 yards, you should have at least 100 hits within a 10-inch circle to ensure an ethical kill. If during this process you discover that your patterning and your patterns stop meeting that threshold, you've identified that load as a non-viable option up to that distance, at least by the NWTF standards. Now, my 2 cents, it only takes one good placed ball of shot to kill a turkey if it hits in the right place, but turkeys are some tough birds, and you have no control over where exactly those different little shots hit. But as you go through this process, you will see some patterns will result in more dead than others will. With this process, essentially what you're doing is you're greatly increasing your efficiency and, more importantly, your confidence as you attempt to harvest the turkey ethically. If you've discovered that multiple different loads pattern efficiently up to your maximum ethical shooting distance, then you've got to determine which load you would go with. A significantly higher number of shot improves your chances of a lethal shot, but remember the trade-off between shot size and shot energy. If I had to choose between a marginal increase in the number of shot versus a larger shot size, I'm going to go with a larger shot because it has more retained energy. But if the number of shot within the pattern was significantly higher, then you may want to go with that shot size as a better option. At this point, you should know what your best load is. I'll also recommend, if you're using a vest when you're going to be hunting, or blind, or some sort of gun rest, shooting sticks, something like that, you should practice with them. Maybe not take a shot, but you don't want the first time you're using that setup to be when you're out in the woods, only to find that you have to adjust how you aim if you can't get a good mount with the shotgun or a good sight picture. And this is also going to make you a little bit more prepared for whatever those jokers throw at you. Like I said, sometimes they have a habit of coming from where you didn't expect. You may also want to throw a pattern at the closer distances, like I showed you with the 25-yard target, maybe even closer than that, or 10 or 15. What that's going to show you is that your margin of error gets smaller and smaller the closer that bird gets to you, and especially depending on the choke tube. If you're using one of the really tight chokes like I am, you're probably going to realize after a certain point you might be better off fixing bayonets. That's it for this video, guys. Hopefully this will help you pattern your shotgun and has increased your knowledge around patterning in general. I know it has for me, certainly. And with a little bit of work, it's easy to make your shotgun the best turkey slayer it can be. Stay tuned for my next video in the series on just some of the miscellaneous gear related to turkey hunting. I was going to do the scouting video a lot earlier, but based on the weather that we've been having, it's been really cold and hasn't stopped me from getting out in the woods, but I think it's kind of affected the normal routine of the turkeys in the spring. They're definitely out gobbling now. The weather's only kind of warmed up in the past week and a half or so. So stay tuned. The scouting video will come out before the start of the season. I've still got about 2 weeks before the season opens up. Youth hunt starts in about a week. So stay tuned, guys. As always, stay safe. This is No More Up For. I'm out.